And welcome to the Rick House. Good evening, folks. My name is Cyrus Farmer. I am your host. You're watching and listening to the Stomp the Tee podcast. Folks, we have a couple things to get into tonight, and I want to tell you, with us being 1 week away from the start of the Masters, I think it's the 89th Masters coming up. We are going to ride the golf theme once again this week, and we're going to talk about Tiger Woods' greatest foil. I think we all know who that is, but we'll discuss it in depth and in detail for tonight's episode. Of course, we'll also get into the ever popular "What are you drinking tonight?" But first, folks, we are in day 26 of the Wolf Watch. What is the Wolf Watch? Well, those of you who are regular followers and listeners of this program know that I bought my wife a Wolf gourmet convection oven, which is basically a fancy toaster oven that she thought was going to be too big for our counter space in the kitchen. She has yet to open it. She has moved it from the dining room table to the dining room floor. As always, no end in sight. I have no idea when this woman, whom I love and is absolutely incredibly intelligent, funny, gorgeous, I'm a lucky man, but I have no idea when she's going to open this oven. I mean, oh my goodness. Anyway, I will keep you posted. Day 26 of the Wolf Watch. The watch continues. Folks, I just got back. I spent a day and a half out in Santa Cruz visiting our youngest child, Rohan, who is a student out there. Now, I was on the ground literally a day and a half. I took a Tuesday morning flight from Philadelphia and got to SFO, got to San Francisco around noon, was down in Santa Cruz, checked into the hotel, and then went to go visit our child, Rohan. Saw him, I guess, around 2:15. I got there. Let me tell you a little bit about my day on Tuesday. So, I traveled that day. So I spent all day running around with Rohan, getting groceries for Rohan and his roommates, going out to lunch, catching up, doing all the things that most parents do when they visit their child at college. So after what was a long day, I go back to the hotel. Now, I'm staying at a Marriott property. It's a Bonvoy property. It's a hotel. What is it called? What was it called? Oh, yeah. It's called the Hotel Paradox in Santa Cruz. It's pretty much in Santa Cruz proper. So, folks, after spending all day with Rohan and traveling cross country in the morning, all I want to do is have a nightcap at the bar and maybe watch a little mindless television and drift off to sleep before seeing Rohan again the following day and catching the red eye back to Philadelphia. Folks, I get to the bar and I order an Eagle Rare neat. Eagle Rare, obviously, most of you know, is a bourbon. It's very, very good bourbon. But in the hotel that I'm staying at, which is not a super fancy hotel, but it's it's relatively comfortable, let's say. They're charging $30 a pour for Eagle Rare. Okay. My opinion, that's definitely overpriced. It's a little expensive for Eagle Rare. But, it's been a long day, and I'm looking to have a nightcap to relax and unwind. Folks, I'm drinking this Eagle Rare, and I finish it relatively quickly. and am looking to order another. Well, the bar at this point has about a total, myself included, of 7 people in it. Folks, I'm going to tell you, it literally took 10 minutes from the time I told the bartender, hey, I'd love another Eagle Rare whenever you get a second, all right? For this bartender to get around to passing my order off to a second bartender. She showed up like halfway through the 10-minute wait. Now, I'm not like staring at my watch, tapping my foot this whole time. I'm actually talking to the 1 or 2 other patrons on my side of the bar, talking about whiskey, talking about bourbon, talking about a little sports. But all the time, you know how sometimes you have a conversation with people who were at the bar, but you kind of have an eye out for the bartender so that, you know, they know like, hey, I'm waiting for a drink. That was me. So the first bartender passes my drink order off to the second bartender. And the second bartender was equally, let's say, determined to entertain yet another customer who shows up after I had already been at the bar. Folks, I'm like, I'm paying $30 a pour for this. But it's not like I'm ordering, you know, can I have another Corona? No, I mean, I'm ready to have 3 or 4 of these just to unwind a little bit. I'm like, what's the guy got to do to get a drink around here? It was very, very strange and very annoying. But all that being said, after a total of 15 minutes waiting for this second pour, I decided to wrap it up, call it a night, and I said, you know, I'll just take a check. 5 minutes later, I get a check. So there's that. 20 minutes after finishing my first and only drink of the night, an Eagle Rare, which was very good, by the way, I get a check and I get to go up to my room to call it a night. Folks, I get it to my room, and what do I notice? I dropped my bags there earlier. I was in the room all of, probably about 35 seconds to drop my bags and leave. When I get up to the room, now remember, they've upgraded me to like a king suite. You don't remember that because I'm telling you that now. I had a king room and they upgraded me to a king suite. So I get up there, and folks, it's like 9:30 at night, which means it is 12:30 in the morning, East Coast time. And the first thing I notice is the chirping from the smoke detector. Okay, so I call the front desk, and they're like, oh, sorry about that, Mr. Farmer. We'll send someone up right away. 10 minutes later, maintenance man comes up, swaps out the battery in the smoke detector, and waits for about 5 minutes. Everything seems fine. Great. So he's off. He's on his way. Apologies, Mr. Farmer. No problem, Mr. Maintenance Man. Have a good night. Have a good night. So I finally get undressed, flick on the TV, pour myself into bed, and 20 minutes later, the smoke detector starts chirping again. Oh my gosh. Folks, I'm trying to tell you. So what do? Of course, I get out of bed. I call the front desk again. I get dressed. I wait for the maintenance man, who took about 8 minutes to get there this time instead of 10 minutes. He swaps out the entire smoke detector unit. To be fair, he did it very efficiently. It was pretty fast. And we wait for another 5 minutes. and we do the same thing again. Apologies, Mr. Farmer. Have a good night. Have a good night. I pulled myself back into bed, and I don't know whether it went off again or whether I slept through it, but that was my night because I got to bed around 10:30, which is 1:30 a.m. East Coast time. So that was my Tuesday night in wonderful Santa Cruz, California. Obviously, Wednesday went much better. Look, that kind of thing is no one's fault necessarily. Anybody can have a bad night. When I say anybody, I'm not talking about me having a bad night. I'm talking about the hotel having a bad night. The bartenders being a little inattentive, and the smoke detector going off when I'm trying to actually call it a night. So, is it the end of the world? No. But that's just a taste of my 36 hours on the ground in Santa Cruz. But I did have a tremendous time with Rohan. It was literally worth every second of being there. All right, folks. I have to tell you, I would be remiss if I didn't remind you to tell everyone you know, tell your friends, tell your enemies, anyone with ears, let them know how much you like, adore, love the Stomp the Tee podcast. We are here for you every single week, each and every single week, whether you like it or not, I might add, giving you content that you cannot find anywhere else. And we're happy to do it. It is a joy for us. It's a pleasure for us. And it's been fantastic getting to know some of you through our socials. So keep those comments coming. We will keep the content coming. Continue to listen. We have this show is on a couple of audio platforms, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Of course, you can see the video version on YouTube as well. We will continue to produce for you because you, the audience, continue to produce for us. And I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. So, let us get into tonight's show. Tiger's greatest foil. Well, who do you folks think I'm talking about? I mean, obviously, Tiger has had long and short moments with various opponents over the course of his career. Bob May comes to mind. To me, still the single most challenging, toughest match Tiger ever had. This is just my opinion. Tiger ever had to go against and still win. Obviously, he went head-to-head with Y.E. Yang at the 2009 PGA and lost. But there's Bob May, Sergio as a youngster and as an adult. We just talked about Rocco Mediate, obviously at the 2008 U.S. Open. And let's not forget, and let's give credit to a rival for Tiger who was very short-lived, but was a rival in more than one big event. And that is Chris DeMarco. Chris DeMarco played Tiger as tough as anyone in Tiger's career. And I think if you ask Tiger about it, he would say, oh yeah, Chris DeMarco. Yeah, very good player. Gave me a hard time. I know that Chris DeMarco was very close to winning that Masters. I think it was 2002, either 2002, 2001, when Tiger chipped in on 16 and then proceeded to bogey 17 and 18 to end up in a playoff with Chris DeMarco. So Chris DeMarco is great. But obviously, when we talk about Tiger's greatest foil, it is Tiger's greatest rival. We can only be talking about one person. And that one person is Philip Alfred Mickelson. Who knew that was his full name? Phil Mickelson. Folks, I have an interesting stat to read for you. This is where we're going to jump off this discussion because we're going to talk about Tiger and Phil. But we're going to talk about Tiger and Phil from a certain point of view. And this is the stat that I want to read to you and let you chew on this for just a little bit. Phil Mickelson never, in his long and illustrious career, Phil Mickelson was never the number one golfer in the world. A little strange, a little hard to believe, but absolutely true. Now, obviously, those of you in Stomp the Tee land are looking and listening to me saying, Cy, of course Phil was never number one in the world. He was playing in Tiger's era. What are you, an idiot? Yes, I get that. I get that. But stay with me. Here's the stat. Phil spent 270 weeks. 270 weeks. I'm going to do, grabbing my phone real quick, and I'm going to do a little quick math. But I can tell you, 270 divided by 52, there are 52 weeks in a year. Folks, that is 5 years. Phil Mickelson spent 270 weeks as the number 2 golfer in the world behind Tiger Woods. 5 years. Folks, I'm going to tell you something else about this stat. In those 270 weeks, 7-0, that Phil spent as number 2 in the world, he was never, in his entire golfing career, number 2 in the world golf rankings, the official world golf rankings, when Tiger wasn't number 1. Folks, I just find that to be an absolutely fascinating step. I mean, Phil's number 2 for over 5 years to Tiger, and he's never number 2 to any other golfer. He may be 3rd, 4th, 5th, 10th, whatever, but he's never number 2 while another golfer is number 1 in the world. And for some strange reason, Phil never finds a way to break through to number 1. It's very, very strange. A fascinating stat. Now, I want to tell you a couple of rivalry notes that I've looked up, and I think you'll find these interesting. Now, if you compare Tiger and Phil to the great rivalries in all of sport, there are several that come to mind. Brady and Manning, right? Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Ali, Frazier, etc., right? I don't think any of those really fit the bill in my mind, because the strangest thing about Tiger and Phil is that as successful as Phil was as a golfer, he is an all-time great, an easy Hall of Famer. Was, obviously, he's in the Hall of Fame, and he's a no-doubter. Tiger was so dominant that it really kind of makes Phil and every other golfer in his era pale in comparison. Now, the question becomes, what if Tiger never played in the era he played, and Phil, Ernie Els, everybody else played without Tiger? What would have happened? There's no guarantee, obviously. When you change anything historically, and I have no proof of this, it is just a theory that I have. I've seen too many sci-fi movies, possibly. Made a couple as well. If you change one thing about the past, inevitably something else will change, whether it's planned on or not. So you can't just take Tiger out of the equation and say, well, for 270 weeks, Phil would have been the number 1 golfer in the world if Tiger had never been born, let's say. But for the purpose of this exercise, let's just pretend that if Tiger had been removed, what would Phil and some of these other golfers in that era have done? There's no way of answering that question. But I think in some ways, Tiger's dominance really unfairly diminishes the strength of golfers that Tiger played against in his era. Think about it. Phil Mickelson, Ernie Els, Vijay Singh. I mentioned Chris DeMarco already. Luke Donald, Lee Westwood. There are so many golfers who were fantastic golfers that just happened to be playing when Tiger was at his peak. So just because Tiger was Tiger Woods doesn't mean that these other golfers weren't great golfers in their own right. They just happened to run up against one of the greatest golfers in the history of the game. So there's that. I'm going to give you my opinion on where the Tiger-Phil rivalry most closely matches. And it's not an apples to apples exactly, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But I think Tiger and Phil, and this is no surprise, it's shock, their rivalry was most like Jack and Arnie, Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer. Obviously, for those who were there to witness it, I was not. Arnold Palmer was wildly popular. And to the day he died, he was a wildly popular golfer. And that is one thing that he and Phil have very much in common. Both he and Phil were major champions and won tournaments. Obviously, Jack was more like Tiger in the sense that he dominated his sport. He didn't dominate his sport the way that Tiger did, but some of you out there are going to say because Jack played against better golfers. I think Jack played against tremendous golfers throughout his entire career. I think Tiger's golfers were in the neighborhood of the same talent level. I might give Jack a little bit of an edge against the guys, Billy Casper, Ray Floyd, you know all the names. I would probably give Jack a little bit of an edge as far as the competition that he played. So I think that Tiger and Jack are very similar, obviously. And Phil and Arnie are very similar. And I think that's kind of where the rivalry that makes the most sense. I think that's where the Tiger-Phil rivalry most closely resembles. Now, Tiger spent 683 weeks as the number one golfer in the world. 683 weeks. That's 13 years, essentially, as the number one golfer in the world. Now, in that 683 weeks, it included the top two records, the top two lengths of most consecutive weeks as the number one golfer in the world. 281 weeks consecutively is number one. 264 weeks is the second most number of consecutive weeks as number one golfer in the world. Remember, the official world golf rankings didn't get invented until April of '86. So everything that happened before that obviously didn't fall into the same category. Second place for both most weeks total as the number one golfer in the world and most consecutive weeks as the number one golfer in the world, well, that belongs to Greg Norman. Greg Norman spent 331 weeks as the number one golfer in the world. And he has the third highest total after Tiger's 281 and 264 for consecutive weeks as the number one golfer in the world. And Greg Norman did that for 96 weeks in a row during that 331. Now, I'm going to give you a list. We all talk about what would happen if Tiger had never been born, or if Tiger wasn't playing golf. How would some of these other players fare? It's hard to remember sometimes because we all look at history with rose-colored glasses. Tiger won 85 tournaments in a row. Tom Brady won 25 Super Bowls. The Bulls never lost a game for 12 years in a row. I mean, we know all of those things are not true, but that's kind of how we remember those kinds of figures. But I'm going to read you a list. This is a list. I read this article, and it was dated in November of 2023. So, as of November of 2023, there were 25 different men who had been the number one golfer in the world. Now, here are the list of the golfers who rose to number one during Tiger's span of 683 weeks. Now, that span occurred from June 1997, when Tiger first became the number one golfer in the world, on and off through May of 2013. And that was the last time Tiger was ever ranked number one in the world. This is the list of the men between 97 and 2013 who supplanted Tiger, whether it was for a week or whether it was for a year, whether for 3 months, doesn't matter. These are the golfers who supplanted Tiger as number one during that 683-week run. Vijay Singh, David Duval, Greg Norman. Again, Greg Norman, he did it in the Tiger era. That's part of his 331. Ernie Els, Lee Westwood, Martin Keimer, Luke Donald, and Rory McIlroy. Folks, listen to that list of golfers. I'll read it again. Vijay Singh, David Duval, Greg Norman, Ernie Els, Lee Westwood, Martin Keimer, Luke Donald, and Rory McIlroy. All of these golfers, at some point from 1997 to 2013, were ranked as the number one golfer in the world. How on earth does Phil Mickelson not find a way to break through during that era? You could argue, and I think I actually would argue, Phil Mickelson has had a better career and was a better golfer than any golfer on this list, including Vijay Singh, including Ernie Els. Phil Mickelson is a better golfer, and he's had a better career. And yet, for some strange reason, he never ascended to the number one spot in the official golf world rankings. It's very, very, very strange. Very strange to me. Now, according to NBCSports.com, they wrote an article in October of 2020. Tiger and Phil had been grouped together at that point, and I think that's probably the total, but who knows. To that point, they had been grouped together 38 times in their careers. Whether it was first round, third round, second round, fourth round, didn't matter. They were playing in the same group 38 times by the end of October of 2020. In those 38 times, Tiger shot a lower score than Phil 19 times. Phil shot a lower score than Tiger 15 times. And there were 4 ties. Now, of those 38 events, Tiger won 8, Phil won 3. Okay. You're like, of course he did. He's Tiger Woods. It's an unfair stat to use against Phil Mickelson. I get it. I found another interesting stat, and I think you guys are going to like this. According to PGAtour.com, Tiger and Phil finished first and second 9 different times through May 2020. Now, of those 9 times, Tiger won 4 of those events. Phil won 5. So when they went 1 and 2 as the result of the tournament overall, Phil won 5, Tiger won 4. Again, to me, it is mind-boggling how Phil Mickelson never found a way to get to number 1 in the world. It is very, very strange. Okay, why? Who knows? We have no idea. I certainly have no idea. Was he? I don't know. You can't even say Phil has a little bit of Brooks Koepka in him because he doesn't. Phil won tournaments left and right. In addition to majors, he wasn't Brooks Koepka. I mean, who shows up and most of his wins on the PGA Tour are majors, not regular events. So that's not Phil. Phil won both. So I cannot understand how he didn't find a way to luck into the number 1 spot or to take the number 1 spot at least for a week. It's very, very strange to me. It's one of the anomalies, I think, in the history of golf. I don't think anyone can ever explain to me how that did not happen at some point. Now, Phil, obviously, he has legions of fans around the world, but he has almost an equal number of detractors. Almost. I think he has more fans than detractors, but he has several detractors. But there's one thing you cannot deny about Phil Mickelson. Forget LIV, forget, whether or not he's a phony, forget the gambling alleged issues. Phil Mickelson was and always will be a great, all-time great golfer. There is no denying the talent there. And Phil Mickelson has always been the real deal. Remember, if I'm not mistaken, Phil won a PGA event as an amateur. That doesn't happen by accident. That's a big, big, big deal. All right. That leads me to another question about Phil Mickelson. Is Phil Mickelson one of the 10 best golfers of all time? Folks, I have some information for you. Obviously, you can make up your own mind. I have my own opinion of this, which I will express to you. But first, I believe the top 4 golfers of all time are without dispute. You can place them in any order you want, but I think these 4 are no-brainers. Tiger Woods, Jack Nicklaus, Bobby Jones, Ben Hogan. I don't think you can argue with any of those 4. I'd be surprised if you did. Those 4 are unimpeachable. And I don't care what order you put them in, but those 4 have to be the top 4. Now, that leaves us with 6 spots. I'm going to give you some candidates for consideration for the other 6 spots. And those golfers will round out the top 10 of all time. The candidates are Walter Hagen, Gary Player, Gene Sarazen, Arnold Palmer, Sam Snead, Lee Trevino, Tom Watson, and Byron Nelson, plus Phil Mickelson. Folks, that's 9 players for 6 spots. Who gets in? Let's take a look at it. I'm going to give you a little overview. Let's remind everyone what we're dealing with when we talk about Phil Mickelson. Phil has 45 PGA Tour wins. He obviously won 6 majors. But, and probably most importantly, Phil holds the record for the oldest winner of a major in the history of golf. When he won the PGA when he won the PGA Championship in 2021, at the age of practically, excuse me, excuse me, that was strange. At the age of practically 51, Phil was 50 years and 11 months old when he won that PGA Championship. Now, Phil also was in the top 10 of the official golf world rankings for 771 weeks. It's a long time, folks. Multiple years. Now, in my opinion, there are some people you have to put in the top 10. Regardless of whether you put Phil there or not, we're going to get to that. But there are some people you have to put in that are no-brainers, in my opinion. And I'm going to read you the list of the people you have to put in. Excuse me. I think you have to include Walter Hagen. Man has 11 majors. He won 45 PGA Tour events. You have to put in Gary Player. Gary has 9 majors. He has 22 PGA Tour victories, but he won 165 times worldwide. No, he also has, obviously, the career Grand Slam, one of only 5 men in the history of the sport who has accomplished the career Grand Slam. Player's got to be in there, so that's 2. I think you actually have to include Gene Sarazen. Gene Sarazen won the 2nd Masters. He has 7 majors. He had 38 career PGA victories. And he also invented the sand wedge. Strange fact, but who knew? So I think you have to include Gene Sarazen there. You may quibble with me on that, and you're allowed. That's fine. Tell me why you leave him off. But I think you have to put Gene Sarazen in there if you know anything about golf. Obviously, Arnold Palmer belongs in the top 10 of all time. Why? Because he's Arnold Palmer. He's got 7 majors. He has 62 career PGA Tour victories, and he is Arnold Palmer. Enough said. I personally think you have to include Sam Snead. Sam has 7 majors. He has the record. He's tied with Tiger for the record for the most PGA Tour wins at 82. Folks, Sam Snead won, and he won a lot. And he's got 7 majors. He has to be top 10 in the history of the sport. I don't care how you slice it. So what are we left with? We are left with 4 golfers for 1 spot. 4 golfers are Phil Mickelson, Tom Watson, Lee Trevino, and Byron Nelson. Folks, I'm going to say this. Of those 4, Mickelson, Watson, Trevino, and Nelson, I'm going to eliminate Byron Nelson. Now, is it fair? No. But I'm going to tell you why. Byron Nelson has 5 majors. He won 52 PGA Tour events. He holds the record for most wins in a tour season at 18 in 1945. That same season, he also won 11 events in a row. Also, a PGA Tour record. The only problem is some people consider those records slightly tainted simply because there were people still overseas in World War II. And the assumption is that Nelson played against weaker fields when he won that 11 in a row and when he won those 18 tournaments in one season. Look, Byron Nelson had won majors before World War II started, but there's a possibility that the strength of fields that he was playing against in 1945 was somewhat compromised. So let's leave Nelson off the list. So now you have 3 golfers for 1 spot: Watson, Trevino, and Mickelson. I'm going to give you a little bit of information, and then I'm going to tell you what I think. It is strange, and I need to go back and watch more of this. But according to the research, both Tom Watson and Lee Trevino, they both beat Jack Nicklaus 4 times each in majors where Jack finished second. Think about that. The guy many people consider the greatest golfer in the history of golf was beaten 4 times by both Trevino and Watson in majors where Jack finished second. We all know the stat. Jack finished second in 19 majors. That is a record in addition to his 18 major wins, which means that Jack was always in the hunt. That's one of the things that makes him one of the greatest golfers ever, if not the greatest golfer. But Watson and Trevino beat him 4 times. Watson won at least 5 tournaments in a year. And Watson did that 4 years in a row, from 1977 to 1980. And in 1980, he won 7 tournaments in that season. So think about it. 77, Watson wins 5 tournaments. 78, he wins 5 tournaments. 79, he wins 5 tournaments. In 1980, he wins 7 tournaments. It's pretty good. So, Lee Trevino, he won 6 tournaments in 1971, and he won 4 tournaments in 1972. And then for Lee, there's a lot of 1, 1, 1, 3, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, right? Lee was not a prolific winner. Lee only has what? Lee only has 29 PGA career wins, but he's also a 6-time major winner. He's Lee Trevino. Let's compare that to Phil Mickelson. Phil Mickelson, the most number of tournaments he's ever won in a single season was 4. And he won 4 tournaments in one season 3 times. 1996, 2000, and 2005. Now you think about it, folks. Phil wins 4 tournaments in 1996. This is Tiger's rookie year. Tiger didn't go to the PGA Tour until the fall of 96. Phil is flying high. Again, we all know this. But if Tiger never plays golf, who knows what Phil Mickelson becomes? He's already a Hall of Famer. He's already an all-time great. But without Tiger to compete against, would Phil have dominated the same way Tiger did? No way of knowing. We have no way of knowing. I don't think so, but I could be wrong. The point is, Phil has always been a tremendous golfer. So, I laid out the case for you folks. I'm going to give you my opinion. Between Watson, Trevino, and Mickelson, I have to give the 10th spot to Tom Watson. Folks, duel in the sun. He beat Nicklaus 4 times. If there had been a world golf ranking back in his day, Tom Watson certainly would have been ranked number 1 at some point during that stretch. He has 8 majors and 39 career victories. Phil Mickelson is an unbelievable golfer, and the fact that he won a PGA championship at almost 51 years old goes an enormous way towards making him one of the all-time greats. But in my opinion, I think Phil falls just outside of the top 10. I probably rank him ahead of Trevino, but I say probably. Folks, don't forget, Lee Trevino was a tremendous golfer and a tremendous competitor. All right, folks, we have now come to my personally favorite part of the show, where I get to ask you a question. What are you drinking tonight? Well, folks, I can tell you what I'm drinking. That is the Ezra Brooks Cask Strength Bourbon Whiskey. Folks, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this product, and then I'm going to tell you what I think about this product. Now, Ezra Brooks Cask Strength Bourbon Whiskey. It is distilled in Kentucky for Lux Row Distillers in Bardstown, Kentucky. What does that mean? It means they sourced this bourbon. They did not distill it themselves, but more on that later. It is 60% ABV. That means it comes in at a very respectable 120 proof. The mash bill is 78% corn, 10% rye, 12% malted barley. There is no age statement, and I got this bottle for $50. Folks, Lux Row, the distillers and producers of this particular bourbon, they source whiskey and they also distill whiskey being bourbon. They produce the wildly overpriced Blood Oath. Blood Oath is well done, but it is wildly overpriced for what it is. They produce Rebel Yell. They produce Lux Row. They have about, 15, what's the word I'm looking for? They have about 15 different expressions, yes, in their lineup. Now, it's widely believed that the juice in this bottle is actually distilled by Heaven Hill. That may or may not be true, but so many people seem to think that's the case that I'm going to assume that it is true. What do I think of it? Folks, this Ezra Brooks Cask Strength runs a little hot. I'm not going to lie to you. Is it burny? No. But it definitely runs hot. If you're drinking this neat, you have a very developed palate. I myself tried it neat, and I've tried it with a cube, small cube, not a large cube. I like it better with a cube. It is, it really opens up, a little less burny, but still retains spice. And yet, with the water, with the cube, the sweetness really comes to the fore. It's well done. Again, $50 a bottle. You can do anything you want with this. Ezra Brooks Cask Strength Bourbon. It is worth including in your bar, especially at $50. Folks, you don't have to love it, but I think you're going to like it. Especially if you put some water in there, especially when I say water, I'm talking about a few drops. Or if you put a cube or two, or you can drink it on the rocks. It's your bourbon. Who cares? Do whatever you want. Don't listen to me. Do what you want. I use 1 cube with it, small cube, and it is completely worth having. Is this my favorite that we've had this year? Is it in the top 3? No, but it's probably in the top 7, 8, something like that. So, Ezra Brooks Cask Strength Bourbon Whiskey. Go out, find it, give it a shot, especially if you can get it for $50 a bottle or less. All right, folks, that is the show for tonight. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for listening. My name is Cyrus Farmer. This is the Stomp the Tee podcast. Next week, I think we're probably going to come to you a day early, and we will be giving you, spoiler alert, our picks for the 2025 Masters. The whole show is going to be about that. And we will tell you what we think, and we will tell you who we're rooting for, and we'll even throw a dark horse or two in there for you. So look forward to that. Again, my name is Cyrus Farmer. This is the Stomp the Tee podcast. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And as always, we will see you on the first tee.